Have you ever heard a courtroom fall silent? Not because of the gavel, not because of a judge's order, but because the weight of truth sucked the air out of the room? Because that's exactly what happened when Queen Camilla, yes, Queen Camilla, was sentenced to 105 years behind bars. The charge? Something no one thought would ever be spoken in public, let alone printed in an official legal document. Involvement in the events leading to the death of Princess Diana. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let that settle in for a moment. Let your mind rewind through history. Think about that image you've seen 1,000 times. Diana's final moments. The haunting glow of flashing headlights. The crushed car in the Paris tunnel. Think of the tears, the shock, the tributes, the unanswered questions. Now imagine being told that after decades of silence, someone finally said the unspeakable. And that someone was the court. But this wasn't just a courtroom twist. It was a bomb detonated beneath the foundations of the British monarchy. The moment that verdict was read out, the entire narrative we've been told, about Diana's death being an unfortunate accident, about Camilla being just a bystander, about the royal family closing that chapter, was ripped to shreds in front of the world. You're probably asking, how? Why now? And what did they find? Good questions. In fact, those are the only questions that matter. And by the end of this expose, you won't just know the answers. You'll feel every twist, every betrayal, every lie that was finally dragged into the light. Let's start with the basics. Because the timing of all this isn't random. For years, silence ruled. A silence bought, protected, reinforced by the iron walls of the palace and the invisible hands of power. But with the queen gone, new rulers took the throne, and with them came a crack in the system. A leak. A voice. A whisper that turned into a tidal wave of evidence. And here's where it gets strange. This wasn't sparked by a journalist. It wasn't a Netflix documentary or a rogue biography. It began with a single envelope. A worn-out, faded cream-colored envelope sent anonymously to a mid-level French investigator working on cold case archives. Inside, a letter that would make your blood run cold. Written in the familiar slant of Princess Diana's own hand, it read, "If something happens to me, please know it wasn't an accident. They've planned it. They want me out of the picture. They won't stop until they get what they want." And at the center of it all is her. No name. But everyone who read it knew who her was. Camilla. But that's just the beginning of this nightmare. Because what followed was a cascade of events no screenwriter could dream up. Lost diary pages, secret audio recordings, bank transactions buried deep in Swiss vaults, and witnesses, some silenced for decades, suddenly finding their voice. Or rather, finally being allowed to use it. So why does this matter now? Because the story of Princess Diana has always been told as a tragedy. But what if it's more than that? What if it's a cover-up? A murder mystery that took 27 years to surface? A story that isn't just about a woman's death, but about the woman who wanted her gone? See, Camilla Parker Bowles didn't just inherit a crown. She inherited a secret. And for years, she wore that crown with the kind of calm, detached grace that the public mistook for resilience. But behind the scenes, documents show she was frantically working to suppress old communications, pay off private contractors, and, most shockingly, rewrite Diana's final will. Yes, you heard that right. But that part, we'll get to soon, because this story moves in layers. The surface level, the one you and I have seen, was the fairy tale gone wrong. The people's princess married into a cold palace, neglected, mistreated, driven into emotional despair. Then, just as she broke free, just as she was rediscovering life with Dodified, crash. End of story. Or so we thought. But underneath that was something darker. A war waged between two women, one adored by the world, the other kept in the shadows. Camilla wasn't just Charles's mistress. She wasn't just the other woman. In letters, testimonies, and voice messages that have now surfaced, she emerges as something else entirely, a strategist, a manipulator, and possibly an orchestrator. Ask yourself this. How many coincidences does it take before something stops being a coincidence? Because that's exactly what one juror reportedly whispered as they stepped into deliberation after the final day of Camilla's trial. And what a trial it was. Closed-door sessions, international media blackouts, a judge who received anonymous threats, Jury members removed mid-proceedings under suspicious circumstances. Evidence entered under seal only to leak hours later. And yet, through all the chaos, the truth refused to stay buried. But here's where things get even more unbelievable. Camilla never confessed. Not once. Not in court. Not to Charles. Not to her own legal team. Yet her guilt was exposed not by her words, but by her past. By an old friend who turned witness. By a secret document Diana had hidden in a friend's country estate. And by a single photo, taken the night before Diana died. You'll hear all about that in this video. The hotel footage that was deleted? We've got the story. The missing seatbelt that mysteriously malfunctioned? The ambulance that took too long to arrive? The driver whose toxicology report didn't add up? It all points to something that no one wanted to believe, but now has to. Camilla wasn't a bystander. She was a player. Maybe even the mastermind. And here's something else. This case didn't just start with a letter from Diana. It reopened because someone close to Camilla cracked. Someone who, after decades of silence, stood up and said, "I can't hold this anymore." Who? Why? What did they know? Let's just say, when you find out who flipped, you'll never see the royal family the same way again. But make no mistake, this isn't just a story about Camilla. It's a story about every wall of protection that allowed her to live above the law. It's a story about the cost of silencing a woman who dared to speak her truth. It's about how long power can protect someone, and what happens when that protection finally runs out. And perhaps most chilling of all, it's about the last thing Diana said to her butler before she left for Paris. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't "I'll be back." It was just 5 words. 5 words that now echo across decades. And haunt the woman who once believed she got away with it all. We'll reveal them soon. But first, let's go back. To the tunnel. To the flash. To the moment the world froze. Because only when you understand how it all ended, can you truly see how it all began. What really happened the night Princess Diana died? And more importantly, what role did Queen Camilla really play? Get ready. Because once this story begins, you won't be able to look away. And what comes next will change everything. What if everything you thought you knew about the night Princess Diana died was wrong? What if the Paris tunnel wasn't just a tragic accident scene, but the final move in a meticulously calculated plan? The date was August 31st, 1997. The world was asleep. And while most people were tucked away in their beds, something far darker was unfolding beneath the streets of Paris. It wasn't just a crash. It wasn't just paparazzi. It wasn't just fate. It was something else entirely. Let's go back. The Ritz Hotel, 12:19 a.m. Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed had just finished dinner. They were trying to escape the chaos outside. Cameras, flashbulbs, dozens of hungry tabloid photographers screaming their names. They weren't heading to a party. They weren't doing drugs. They weren't racing for the thrill. They were running. Running from something. Running from someone. And as the couple made their way into the black Mercedes-Benz, something felt off. Their driver, Henri Paul, was acting strange. Security footage shows him pacing erratically, smiling, looking into the distance as if waiting for something or someone. But here's the thing. Henri Paul wasn't just the hotel's head of security. He was also on the payroll of the French intelligence service. That's right. He had ties to multiple agencies, including the DGSE, and had been receiving unusually large sums of money in the weeks before the crash. Money that was never explained. Why would a hotel security manager be wired over 20,000 francs just days before that night? And why was he so calm as he stepped into the driver's seat, even though he knew dozens of photographers were tailing them? The car exited the Ritz. It didn't take the usual route. Why? Because Henri Paul made a detour. One that bypassed their security protocol. One that led them straight toward the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Now ask yourself, who would have known that route? Who had the influence to manipulate traffic cameras, street patrols, and even emergency services? And who had a vested interest in ensuring Diana never left that tunnel alive? Let's look at the facts. Inside the car were 4 people: Diana, Dodi, Henri Paul, and Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard. The only one to survive? The bodyguard. But his memory? Wiped. He suffered massive head trauma. When he woke up, he couldn't remember a thing. Convenient? Let's dig deeper. At 12:23 a.m., the car entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. It was going fast, too fast. Reports say over 60 miles per hour. Some claim 100. But here's the kicker. Just seconds before entering the tunnel, eyewitnesses saw a bright white Fiat Uno speeding alongside them. Where's that car now? Gone. Never found. Not even a trace. The French government issued dozens of requests for any leads. But nothing. It vanished. Just like that. You're telling me a car involved in one of the most investigated deaths in modern history managed to disappear into thin air? Or was it helped? The crash happened in the 13th pillar of the tunnel. Not the first. Not the third. The 13th. Strange coincidence? Now consider this. All CCTV cameras in the tunnel, every single one, were either malfunctioning or under maintenance that night. What are the odds? 24 surveillance points. All dark. Just hours later, authorities declared it an accident. Blamed the paparazzi. Blamed the driver. Closed the case before an autopsy was even complete. But what they didn't count on was the noise that wouldn't die. The people didn't buy it. Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, didn't buy it. Investigators from the UK, France, even the US, they didn't buy it. Because too many things didn't add up. Let's talk about Diana's seatbelt. She always wore it. Always. She even lectured friends about safety. Yet that night, her seatbelt was unbuckled. But here's the strange part. A forensic expert later confirmed that the belt mechanism had been tampered with. The belt was there, but it had been intentionally disabled. How do you explain that? And then, there's the delay. It took an hour and 10 minutes to get Diana to the hospital. 1 hour. 10 minutes. She wasn't dead on the scene. She was alive. Critically injured, yes, but breathing. And yet they didn't rush her to the nearest hospital. They drove past several, claiming they needed one with specialized trauma equipment. Really? In the middle of Paris? What happened in that ambulance? Why was it stopped for over 5 minutes just 2 blocks from the hospital? And here's the question no one wants to ask. Was someone in that ambulance instructed to make sure she didn't survive? Sounds unthinkable. So did Camilla being sentenced to 105 years? Let's go back to the phone call. Just before Diana entered that car. Just before she vanished into that tunnel, she made one final phone call. To her butler, Paul Burrell. He didn't pick up, but she left a message. She said, "Something's off tonight. If anything happens, tell them I knew. Tell them I knew it wasn't going to stop." And then she said 5 chilling words. We'll reveal those soon. But what about Camilla? Where was she that night? The official record says she was at her private residence, Highgrove, reading, resting, alone. But leaked documents from the French court now paint a different picture. Camilla allegedly made several international calls that night. One to a number tied to an intelligence contact in France. Another to a private line traced to a now-defunct royal protection detail. And one more to a hotel in Paris. The name on the registry? Never disclosed. But get this, she later instructed her aides to erase those call logs from her private records. Why? What did she know? And here's where it gets darker. Days before Diana's death, she reportedly confided in a friend that she had proof of a plot. She said she was keeping it somewhere safe, just in case. That proof was never found. Until now. Because the court uncovered something unexpected, a storage unit in rural Scotland. Inside, a locked box. Inside the box, a voice recording. One Diana made herself. It hasn't been released to the public. Not yet. But sources close to the investigation say it was enough to convince the judge that what happened in that tunnel was no accident. And that Camilla? She wasn't just the woman in the shadows. She was part of the plan. What kind of person orchestrates the death of another woman? Just to be loved? Just to wear a crown? And what kind of system allows her to get away with it for decades? We'll dive into that. Because this chapter was just the tip of the iceberg. Diana's death was tragic. But the truth behind it? That's explosive. Because next, we uncover a letter written by Diana herself. A letter that says, word for word, they are planning something. It involves a car crash. It involves her. Yes, her, Camilla. But that's not even the most chilling part. Because the one thing no one saw coming was who delivered that letter to the court. And when you find out who it was, you'll realize this wasn't a tragedy. It was an execution. And it was years in the making. We'll get to that in chapter 2. But first, what were the 5 words Diana whispered in that final voicemail? They weren't meant for the public, but they've just been unsealed, and they change everything.